Operation Sindoor and after. Our country, India, has carried out an Operation Sindoor in the early wee hours of May 7th, 2025. Certainly, it was an answer, if not a retaliation, to the Pahalgam incidents which has taken place in April 23. At the cost of 26 innocent Indian citizens, this particular wound was inflicted upon our country. And after a gap of 15 days, our country has responded to it. It will be difficult to say that it was merely a retaliation. In fact, if we Indian citizens are any independent and most importantly impartial observer has to take a look at it, it can be clearly seen that it was certainly a well thought out response to what has happened on Pahalgam attack. Whenever I'm thinking during last few hours, as far as this instance of Operation Sindoor is concerned, certain features are getting highlighted in my mind. This recording is nothing else but a recitation of the same. First and foremost, what a coincidence that as far as the event of Operation Sindoor on early hours of May 7 is concerned, it is preceded by a fortnight. During that particular fortnight, we have felicitated and facilitated three important events as far as Hindu Panchang is concerned. That fortnight has earmarked three occasions. One, Akshay Tritiya. Second, Adya Shankaracharya Jayanti. Third, Bhagwan Parshuram Jayanti. If you are able to recollect that Adya Shankaracharya or Adi Shankaracharya and Bhagwan Parshuram has a relation not only with the geography and history of Kashmir, but it's an combination. These two personalities are a fantastic combination of Shastra and Shastra, wealth and wisdom, patience and passion. If nothing else, Operation Sindoor can certainly be described in combination or rather these three combination of these two words. So it is befitting to celebrate a Shankaracharya Jayanti and Bhagwan Parshuram Jayanti by way of Operation Sindoor. It clearly demonstrates that henceforth the word defense, as far as Indian economy, Indian policy, Indian polity, and most importantly, Indian society is concerned, is not restricted, refined, and defined merely to the protection of four walls of India. It is going to henceforth protect not only the ethics but also the ethos. It is going to protect not only the motions and emotions, but it can set the peace in motion as well. As Veer Savarkar used to say, every peace has to be demonstrated by a show of power. It is more deterrent in nature and it is more definitive in nature rather than being descriptive. So, if anything else, or rather, if nothing else, Operation Sindoor is merely an epitome and exclamation of Indian defense definition. It needs to be understood that there were previously the attacks in the nature of terrorism. But if you recollect, in the recent history of India, one retaliation has taken place on 10th day from the action. The second retaliation has taken place on a 12th day from the terrorist action. And this particular Operation Sindoor has taken place on 15th day from the Pahalgam terrorist attack. Under such circumstances, in Indian religious beliefs, to be precise, Hindu religious belief, Dahawa, Barawa, and Pandrava marks a special occasion. It's an occasion to remember, it's an occasion to worship, it's an occasion to give a commitment to a departed soul. To be honest, Operation Sindoor was really symbolic and symptomatic as far as its retaliation or its response to Operation Sindoor was concerned. It was culminated by the press conference conducted by two lady army officers in the presence of Chief Foreign Secretary of our country. It clearly shows that policy and action are together as far as Operation Sindoor is concerned. It needs to be understood that such occasion are may sound to be temporary, but it is never temporary in nature. A reaction can be instant and implemented temporarily, but strategy and war has to be always long term with a clear head and most importantly unambiguous action. Unless and until it is like that, it doesn't end into the result which a propagating country expects and extends. Under such circumstances, Operation Sindoor needs to be looked into various aspects. One has to note very clearly that it is an answer to an inflicted, uninvited wound on the ethos, ethics, emotions of Indian citizens. It has demonstrated three things, and it needs to be understood in the right perspective. First and foremost, it is known very clearly, or it has to be understood and realized very clearly that Indian economy, that is our national economy, is not an war economy. Under such circumstances, the definition of war economy would be thrust open to us, not only by the intellectual sleeper cells, but even the international ethos. One has to understand that after the Pahalgam attack, even after the Pahalgam attack, Pakistan was having some national and international supporters. They may be limited in number as far as the openness of their support is concerned, but one has to be very careful that there has to be a sleeper cell. Pahalgam is not a part and parcel of Pakistan. Pahalgam is not a part and parcel of POK or Pakistan occupied Kashmir. It is very clear that those terrorists who involved themselves either on their own behalf on somebody's propagation for the same, they have rekeyed the comment and geography of Pahalgam before. And that would not have been possible unless and until cohort or open sleeper cells were operational. To be honest, such sleeper cell is the major threat to our economy, to our polity, and to our sovereignty. This thing need to be dealt with a stern hand and a clear mind. And it may be possible that such things, such operations, such ideas, and such identities will not be clear to us for years together. I may like to recall an instance of a Munich Olympic. One has to be very clear that Israel, a country like Israel, a strategy like Israel, an intention like Israel, an implementation like Israel, took 18 long years to do away with the heinous crimes and criminals involved in assassination of Israeli players at Munich Olympic. I'm not indicating or implementing that it will take 18 years. My mere point over here is to state that Operation Sindoor might have been successful as far as terrorist bases are concerned in POK, but supporters thereof needs to be dealt with. Of course, it would be a matter of internal strategy as well as international pressures and peers to note with. Under such circumstances, it was not merely symbolic that, as I said earlier, the press conference was answered by two highest lady officials of Indian armed forces. It was not merely because the operation was titled as Operation Sindoor, but it was also because 26 widows have taken place as far as that instance is concerned. So it is more a matter of satisfaction and solace, as if government is acting as an aging elderly mother for those 26 widows of our country. It is stated that empathy flows from emotions, and emotion is a prerogative of armed forces wives. It needs to be understood the services rendered by the army wives and army women associations across the country. It has a connotation to the polity as well as to an economy. So now let us move away to some extent as far as Operation Sindoor is concerned, and let us try to assess, analyze, and implement certain policies which may be required therefore. First and foremost, it is not a coincidence that such attacks, either sporadic or spring have taken place, especially during post corona stages, because Corona was certainly a disaster. But it needs to be understood that India happens to be amongst those three economies who have not only survived the Corona impact, but to some extent they have thrived therefrom. Under such circumstances, it is not merely a coincidence that during the phase between Pahalgam attack and Operation Sindoor, even the IMF, who otherwise happens to be the biggest critic of Indian policies, have proclaimed that there is every likelihood that in next 8 to 10 months, Indian economy would rank number 4 as far as global pecking order of economy is concerned. It may be merely a number, but what it signifies is that it clearly shows that our economic policy is on the right path. A pace of implementation, and that too a sectoral pace of a sectoral implementation, may be a matter of discussion and debate. But certainly, it's not a matter of direction. And as there goes a saying in Marathi, की लगडलेल्या फळांच्या झाडावरतीच दगड मारली जातात, that is exactly happening. Because if you see the contrast between a Pakistan economy and Indian economy, one thing is very clear that under the circumstances, Pakistan has nothing to lose and India has everything to gain. The two countries who have taken place their birth on the same moment of a 15th of August 1947, their history of last 75 years, especially their history, economic history of last 75 years, is of completely different directions and dimensions. Take a classic example. As our market on May 7th have started, Karachi Stock Exchange indices have bombed, whereas Indian Stock Exchange indices have remained steady. It's not merely a coincidence. It needs to be understood. The precision and speed with which Operation Sindoor was conducted. Prior to that, Uri surgical strike was conducted in a similar manner. Kargil is also the epitome of it. Under such circumstances, it needs to be understood that the concept of defense has not remained restricted as far as the protection of our four borders are concerned. Post Corona India, which is relying heavily on the policy of Atmanirbhar, has made the initiation in the nature of Make in India and Stand Up India. Defense sector happens to be a glittering example of it. Whenever I am looking at the progress and performances of Indian defense sector during last 5 years, invariably I am reminded of Lokmanya Balgangadhar Tilak. This remembrance is not merely because my surname also happens to be Tilak, but because the demands initiated and enunciated by Lokmanya Gangadhar Tilak way back in 1905 about a defense are getting implemented in right earnest and spirit. Although he might have not have been credited publicly by the government in this regard, the policies are identical. Tilak have stated in 1905 Nagpur Congress Adhivesan saying that the production of the weapons and the weaponry which are used by the Indian soldiers, he has used the word Hindustani soldiers, must be produced in India. That would save from any misconceptions and misunderstandings. He has equally said that Hindustani Sainik must be given an equal opportunity. If we see it at the crux of the defense sector policies in a post corona period in 2020, we have declared as a country that in next 5 years at least 75% of a production needed for Indian defense services in the nature of goods and services will be produced only within our country. Now we are in 2025, so that period of 5 years is approaching fast, and we have certainly made the advances in that particular direction. It needs to be understood that a second pronunciation in post-corona Atmanirbhar policy for defense was that whenever our defense department of Indian government is coming out with a single tender up to the tune of 18,000 crore of rupees, those tender demands will have to be met only by the Indian company. And it needs to be understood that we have really made a rapid progress thereinto. When Modi government took over for its third term in May 2025, in May 2024, it was announced that during the current financial year, Indian government will endeavor to have the defense export to the tune of 65,000 crores. It's not merely a number. It's not merely a mission statement, but certainly an action plan for the same. It needs to be understood that not only the production and exports, but our army equipment or our equipness with the army requirement is on rise. It's not an impact or it's not merely a coincidence that hardly few days before the Pahalgam attack, Indian government has entered into an agreement with France government for import of Rafale aeroplanes to the tune of rupees 63,000 crores. It's not merely a coincidence that few months back Tata Group, Indian government and France government has entered into an understanding that the production of helicopters and its spare parts will be initiated in our country itself. That doesn't mean that we are a war economy because the word war economy has a different economic connotation. The word war economy has a different political connotation. The word war economy has a different social connotation. It needs to be understood because after the Operation Sindoor, this particular terminology will be labeled frequently, fearlessly, and ferociously as far as our national policies are concerned. As a proud, sensitive Indian citizen, we need to understand that ours is not a war economy. Politically and strategically, that economy is called a war economy, which thrusts war on others. Because for such national economies, war happens to be a commercial activity. In our entire history of independent India since 1947, we have never inflicted war on others. Number one. Number two, as far as economic connotations are concerned, that country's economy is called war economy, for whom war with any other two countries, including themselves, happens to be a source of export and economic activity. That is not the case as far as our country is concerned. And if I have to protect my resources, if I have to protect my reforms, if I have to protect my realizations under such circumstances, protecting merely the borders doesn't help, but protecting your indigenous equipments also matters. And that's why ours is not a war economy. But it needs to be understood that Operation Sindoor means many more things than that. Because during last few years, Kashmir is changing fast. The fruits may not be visible to that extent, but the ray hopes of the early morning are certainly there on the wings, because it needs to be understood that after the abolition of Article 370, Kashmiran economic activity is certainly on the rise, not only in the nature of a growing tourism and tourist center. Just imagine that 26 tourists who had lost their life in Pahalgam attack were coming from different parts of our country. That clearly demonstrates that the activities right from homestay to energy are on rise. One needs to understand very clearly that in an aftermath of Operation Sindoor, 5 airports nearing the Indo-Pak border have been closed temporarily for civil aviation facilities. And out of those 5 airports, 3 airports are from the two union territories of Kashmir, Jammu, and Leh Ladakh. It is obvious that such a rule has to be proclaimed only because the growing tourism is taking place in that country or in that state or a geography of our country. It needs to be understood that in order to meet such growing requirements, the energy sources and power has been enhanced as far as Jammu Kashmir and Leh Ladakh is concerned. It needs to be understood that such power facilities are being generated and directed not only on behalf of state governments and central government, but we have resorted to adopt the foreign technology and capital for the same. The visibilities are impeccable as far as these things are concerned. So terrorism may be the only export industry as far as our neighboring country Pakistan is concerned, but that's no more true as far as Kashmir and our country is concerned, because we have never relied them on that in the past, nor we are going to rely in the present. But unless and until we are vigilant about such things, this would not take place. And probably we are moving in the same direction. There may be a differences of opinion as far as political priorities and social obligations are concerned. But we as a national economy has to be very clear that in knowledge-centric economy, our country is moving in a right direction. And willy-nilly, probably the Pahalgam attack was in one way a recognition of it by the nation who is losing badly in that particular race. So not only the ethos and implementation, but a code of conduct and a code of policy needs to be protected to a great extent. And that's why our reply was measured, but certainly with a huge connotation, not only of emotions, not only of words, not only of actions, but most importantly of intention. So what needs to be protected during and after the Operation Sindoor is an intention at all levels. So probably the drill initiated by our policymakers and the rulers may be mock in nomenclature, but in reality, that drill is to drill into ourselves, our minds, our ethos, our brain, our action, and our reaction that we citizens are standing solidly, not only with our polity, but with our military and our society at large, and Kashmir borders in particular. Because today this is the common thread not only for Kashmir, Jammu, and Leh Ladakh, but certain exercises need to be done. So probably the next action could be or should be against the internal slip, solars, and sails as well. And that is a signal which is being given by an economy or operations in the their last point as far as this audio recording is concerned is that, as I said before, IMF has said that India or Indian economy can become economy number 4 as far as global economic pecking order is concerned. Certain doubters and naysayers within the country and outside may have the connotation. it needs to be understood that yes, such frequency unfortunately occurs, then there may be some time delay. But it's a foregone conclusion. Not only it's a theoretical probability, but certainly certain practical possibilities as well. But one has to be very clear that when you are talking about a rank in a pecking order, not only the economy concerned matters, but also the economies of their competitors matter. Because pecking order is always an comparative analysis. Pecking order is not merely a performance sheet. It is just like my annual card, which I used to get as far as my school days are concerned. At the time of my annual results, in my Pragati Pustak or a progress report, I used to get two things. First one was a subject wise mark, and second one was a rank in a class. Improving my marks is within my capacity, but deciding the rank is always a comparative analysis. What IMF is talking about is not sector wise performance, but it is talking about a rank. So not only my national economy, but economy of my competitors also matter. But as far as sectoral performance is concerned, it does stand within my purview and my preview. But for that, I have to be consistent because whether it is a terrorism or an economy, it is an industry and a matter of continuous process. And such occurrences like Pahalgam or Operation Sindoor sometimes do act do act as a hindrance. And it is especially so when on a global map there are warlike situations on five different places and none of them are within the control of my national policy or national economy. Under such circumstances, the word Operation Sindoor has many connotations. It may be noted. It is said in Hindu ethos that Sindoor has a particular word, meaning, and implication. Sindur is a sign of my Saubhagya. The word Saubhagya not only connotes the status of my married life, but it also connotes the status of Sukhi Din or Suvarna Din. If I have a Suvarna Din in my Bhagya, that Suvarna Din may be for Sahvas, that Suvarna Din may be for Samruddhi, that Suvarna Din may be for Sanskruti, that Suvarna Din may be for Sanskar, that Suvarna Din may be for Sangati, that Suvarna Din may be for Sadbuddhi, that Suvarna Din may be for Sadgati and Satkarma. Under such circumstances, you would realize that by implementing Operation Sindhu, our country and our policymakers are trying to have all of them as far as national Saubhagya is concerned, and that's the word and meaning of Operation Sindoor and after. Thanks a lot.